Hi, have a nice listen. Don't forget to like and comment on what you think of this story. After the message, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I stared at my phone for what felt like forever. The screen still lit up with that voicemail notification. Steve, I think there's something you should know about Emily. Call me back. It's important. That voice, it wasn't familiar, and yet, it was like it knew me, knew us. What could they possibly want to tell me about Emily that I didn't already know? I couldn't just ignore it. So, I dialed the number back. My heart was racing, my thumb hovering over the screen for a second before I pressed call. It rang once, twice, then a few more times. No answer. Straight to voicemail. I didn't bother leaving a message. I let out a frustrated sigh and tossed my phone on the couch beside me. I glanced down the hallway toward our bedroom, thinking about how Emily had been acting lately. Sweet, almost too sweet, like she was trying to make up for something. Or maybe I was reading too much into it. Either way, the air between us felt charged, and I didn't know how to deal with it. A few minutes later, Emily came back into the living room, already in her pajamas. She gave me a small smile, her eyes flicking to the TV, and then to me. "You coming to bed?" she asked softly, as if she could sense the weight hanging between us. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded, getting up from the couch and following her down the hallway. As we slipped under the covers, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. We lay there in the dark, the only sound being the faint hum of the ceiling fan. I stared up at the ceiling, trying to clear my mind, but all I could think about was that voicemail. Who was this person, and what did they know about Emily? I didn't sleep much that night. I woke up the next morning, blinking against the sunlight streaming through the curtains. I reached over to Emily's side of the bed, but it was empty. My heart skipped a beat. Where was she? It was our day off, and we didn't have any plans. She usually slept in late on Saturdays. I sat up, my mind immediately jumping to the worst-case scenario. Had she left without telling me? Was she with someone else? That stupid voicemail was clouding my thoughts, making me suspicious of everything. I got out of bed, pulling on a shirt as I headed toward the kitchen. The smell of coffee and something cooking hit me as soon as I stepped into the hallway, and I stopped in my tracks. Emily wasn't gone. She was making breakfast. I walked into the kitchen, and there she was, standing at the stove, humming softly to herself. She was wearing that flowery apron my mom had given her a couple of years ago, the one she only wore when she was in an extra good mood. She turned and smiled when she saw me, a plate of pancakes already on the counter. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she said brightly, her voice cheerful, like nothing was wrong. I figured I'd make us some breakfast. I tried to smile back, but something felt off. It was like she was trying too hard, and I couldn't stop thinking about that number. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, glancing at it. Still nothing from whoever had called me last night. "Thanks," I muttered, sliding my phone back into my pocket as I took a seat at the table. Emily noticed. "Everything okay?" she asked, flipping the last pancake onto a plate. "You've been quiet." I shrugged, forcing a grin. "Yeah, just thinking about work. You know how it is." She nodded, sitting across from me with her own plate of food. For a moment, we ate in silence, the clink of our forks the only sound in the room. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It felt heavy. Emily kept glancing at me like she wanted me to talk, but I didn't know what to say. After a few more bites, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled out my phone under the table and quickly typed a message to that unknown number. I just sent a question mark. I tucked the phone away. A few minutes later, she looked up from her plate. "I'm meeting up with a couple of friends later tonight. We haven't seen each other in a while, so I thought it'd be nice to catch up." "Oh? Who are you meeting?" Emily smiled softly, like she knew where my mind was going. "Relax, Steve. It's just Sarah and Julie. Look." She pulled out her phone and showed me their chat, scrolling through their conversation about meeting up later. I glanced at the screen and nodded, trying to push away the gnawing feeling in my gut. "Okay," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "Sounds good." But as she put her phone away, a thought crossed my mind, and I couldn't shake it. What if she got her friends to stage this conversation just to keep me from getting suspicious? I almost laughed at myself. This was getting ridiculous. But still, the thought lingered. Later that afternoon, Emily busied herself with cleaning the apartment. She was scrubbing surfaces, tidying up the living room, moving things around like she was on some mission. I offered to help, but she waved me off, telling me I should go grab groceries instead. So, I grabbed my keys and headed out to the store. I needed a break anyway. As I wandered the aisles, throwing random items into the cart, my mind kept going back to that number. Just as I was about to check out, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Steve." I turned to see Kim, Emily's sister, standing at the end of the aisle with a basket in her hand. She smiled sweetly, but there was something about her look that felt off. "Hey, Kim," I said, forcing a grin as she walked toward me. "Doing some grocery shopping, huh?" she asked, glancing at my cart. "Not too exciting." I chuckled, shaking my head. "Yeah, just picking up a few things. What about you?" "Oh, just grabbing some snacks for later. You know how it is." We made small talk for a few minutes, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Kim was acting weird. She was too friendly, too casual. When we were done chatting, I turned to leave, but before I got too far, I heard her call my name again. "Steve." I turned back, and she hesitated, like she was about to say something important, but then she just smiled and shook her head. "Never mind. It's nothing." I frowned. "You sure?" "Yeah, it's nothing. See you around." She waved and disappeared down another aisle, leaving me standing there, feeling more confused than before. When I got home, the apartment was spotless. It smelled like fresh cleaning supplies and the faint scent of dinner being cooked. Emily was in the kitchen again, chopping vegetables, her hair tied up in a messy bun. "Dinner's almost ready," she said without turning around. "You hungry?" "Not really," I said, pulling out my laptop and sitting down at the table. "I'll just eat later." Emily paused for a moment, clearly disappointed, but then nodded. "Okay, I understand." We ate separately, her at the kitchen counter, me at the table with my laptop open, answering emails. The silence between us felt different now. After dinner, Emily got ready to leave. She grabbed her purse and slipped on her shoes by the door, glancing over her shoulder at me. "I won't be long," she said, her voice softer than usual. "We haven't seen each other in a while, but it shouldn't take too long." I nodded, giving her a quick smile. "All right, have fun." She hesitated for a moment, then walked out, the door clicking softly behind her. The apartment felt eerily quiet once she left. I sat back down at the table, answering a few more work emails, but my mind kept drifting back to that unknown number. I checked my phone, still no reply. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, my heart pounding in my chest. Then, just as I was about to give up, my phone buzzed. I grabbed it instantly, my heart racing. It was from that number. "Let's meet instead. In 2 days, on Monday, Café La Luna, 9 p.m. I blinked, rereading the message. What the hell was going on? I quickly typed back, "Who are you?" But there was no answer. I sat at the table, my laptop open in front of me, but my mind was somewhere else. I couldn't concentrate. I tried to focus on the emails in front of me, but the words just blurred together on the screen. I had work to do, but I kept checking the time, wondering where Emily was. She had said she wouldn't be out long. That was hours ago. The clock on my phone read 11:47 p.m. Emily was still out, and I hadn't heard from her. A part of me wanted to text her, just to see what was going on, but something held me back. I didn't have the energy to worry, not after everything that had been going on. I felt drained. By the time it hit midnight, I decided to call it a night. I headed to the bathroom to brush my teeth. As I stood in front of the mirror, toothbrush in hand, I heard the front door creak open. "Steve." Emily's voice echoed faintly from the hallway. I glanced at the bathroom door as she walked in, swaying slightly, a goofy smile plastered across her face. She wasn't drunk, not fully. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes a little too bright. I didn't say anything, just kept brushing. "Sorry I'm late," she said, laughing softly, then noticing me brushing my teeth. "Oh, I need to do that too. I'm a little drunk, and I still have to kiss you." Before I could react, she grabbed my toothbrush right out of my hand and started brushing her own teeth, wobbling slightly as she leaned against the counter. I stepped back, feeling a mix of irritation and confusion. "Emily." She pulled the toothbrush from her mouth, still giggling. "What?" "I'm sorry." "Okay?" My friends had so much news, we lost track of time. I rinsed my mouth and faced her. "Yeah, and I see you drank." She shrugged, leaning her head on the bathroom door frame. "Well, yeah, a little. You know how it is with friends. Especially since it's Saturday, no work tomorrow. No big deal, right?" "I'm sorry." Her words slurred just a little at the edges, and she gave me that lopsided smile that used to make me laugh. But tonight, it didn't land. I didn't respond, just watched as she tossed the toothbrush into the sink and stumbled toward the bedroom. Emily kicked off her shoes, stripping out of her clothes like she didn't have a care in the world. She tossed them in a pile, heading straight for the bathroom again to hop in the shower. Moments later, I could hear the water running, and I just stood there, staring at her mess, trying to figure out what I was feeling. Frustration? Confusion? Disappointment? I shook my head, heading back to the living room. I checked my phone again, hoping to distract myself. Still no new messages from that number, but the earlier one nagged at me. Why was it all happening now? By the time Emily finished her shower and crawled into bed, she was out cold. I stood in the doorway, watching her sleep for a moment. She looked peaceful, like nothing was wrong. Maybe, for her, nothing was. But for me? I tried to lie down next to her, tried to force myself to sleep, but my mind wouldn't shut off. I kept tossing and turning. Finally, I gave up. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and scrolled through it mindlessly, my thumb flicking up and down the screen, though nothing really held my attention. Until my phone buzzed. One new message. It was from that number. "Derek, your wife's ex?" I stared at the screen, completely frozen. Derek? Who the hell was Derek? Emily told me she hadn't had any boyfriends before me. She had always been clear about that. When we'd had the ex conversation, she said she'd never found anyone she truly connected with before me, that she had been waiting for the one to marry and settle down with. She had seemed almost proud of it. I remember the conversation like it was yesterday. We were sitting on the couch, just talking about our pasts. I had told her about my previous relationships, how they had ended, what I had learned. Emily had listened quietly, but there was this sadness in her eyes. She had been a little quiet after that, almost hurt, and when I asked her why, she looked away, saying softly, "It just makes me sad, you know, that you had all these experiences with other people, but I never had that. I've only been waiting for someone I can really trust." I told her it didn't matter, that what was in the past was in the past, and that I was with her now, that I loved her, and nothing else mattered. I remember holding her hand, repeating it until she smiled. She seemed to believe me. And now, here I was, staring at a message from someone claiming to be her ex, someone I never knew existed. Why didn't she tell me? Was this guy lying? Or had she been keeping this a secret the whole time? Questions flooded my brain. How did Derek even have my number? Why now, when things between Emily and me were already tense? And what did he want? I glanced over at her, still asleep, her hair damp from the shower. I stared back at the message, my mind racing. Should I confront her about it? Should I reply to Derek? I couldn't just ignore this. not when it was staring me in the face. I typed a quick response. How do you know my number? I waited, staring at the screen, hoping for a response, but nothing came. Just the eerie quiet of our dark bedroom, the faint sound of Emily's soft breathing next to me. I set my phone down, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no way I could sleep now. Not after this. Sunday was supposed to be my day off. A day to get my mind off things, away from work, away from the drama with Emily, and whatever the hell that message from Derek meant. I didn't want to think about any of it. So, I decided to do something I hadn't done in months. Meet up with the guys. Alvin, Travis, Ken, and Rick. The crew. We weren't party animals anymore. Not like we'd been back in the day. Life had settled down, for some of us more than others. Rick had been married for a while, Alvin was newly engaged, and the rest of us were floating somewhere in between. Travis and Ken were still bachelors, living the single life. Me? Well, I was married, but I didn't even know what that meant anymore. We rarely got together these days. Life had a way of pulling us in different directions, but Travis had texted me earlier in the week about getting together at his place for the game. I jumped at the chance. It was exactly what I needed. Beer, football, and mindless conversation. No drama, no stress, just a break. By the time I arrived at Travis's house, the others were already there. Travis greeted me at the door, a beer in hand and a grin on his face. "Steve-o, finally, man. Thought you were gonna bail on us," he said, clapping me on the back as I stepped inside. The house was pretty much how I remembered it. Travis hadn't changed a thing. Same beat-up couch, same clutter of video games and DVDs scattered across the coffee table. The smell of cheap pizza lingered in the air. The guys were already lounging in front of the TV, a football game playing in the background. Alvin and Rick were arguing about something game-related, while Ken was sprawled out on the recliner, texting on his phone. "Steve," Rick called out when he saw me. "Look who finally decided to show up." Yeah, I muttered, cracking a grin as I grabbed a beer from the cooler. Wouldn't miss it. We all settled in pretty quickly, falling into the easy rhythm we always did when we got together. The game was already in full swing, and after a few beers, I felt myself starting to relax. It felt good, being with the guys again, like old times. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed it. After the game ended, the conversation shifted as we transitioned to video games. Travis fired up the console, and we started playing, taking turns between rounds of multiplayer. I was feeling better, almost like my old self again, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at it, expecting nothing important, but when I saw the message, my stomach tightened. "Mom, Steve, please don't pressure Emily. We talked. Don't take it personally." I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening around the phone. Seriously? I thought. Of all days, she chose today to drop that on me? I hadn't even mentioned Emily to her, and now she was telling me not to pressure her? I didn't need this right now. I needed a break. I didn't reply. I wasn't about to get sucked back into that mess when I was finally having a good time. I shoved my phone back into my pocket, trying to ignore the anger bubbling up inside me. I took a long swig of my beer, hoping it would help me cool off. As the game went on, the conversation drifted to random topics. Work, relationships, dating apps, typical guy talk. Then Ken, who had been mostly quiet, started sharing a story about his latest date. "She was a real hottie," Ken said, smirking as he leaned back in his seat. "We had a great time. Went out for drinks, then back to her place. But I don't think it's gonna be anything serious. You know how it is." Travis snorted. "You're always saying that. When are you gonna settle down?" Ken shrugged. "I don't know, man. Not in a rush." It was all fun and games until Ken's expression shifted slightly, and he glanced at me. There was a pause before he spoke again, his tone more careful this time. "Hey, Steve, I gotta ask, are you and Emily okay?" I looked at him, feeling a wave of unease. Why? Ken scratched the back of his neck, looking a bit uncomfortable. I saw her on a dating site. A while back. I wasn't sure if I should bring it up. My heart skipped a beat. What? He held up his hands quickly, trying to ease the tension. Look, man, I don't want to make things weird, but I saw her profile and I just thought, well, maybe you guys were going through something, or I don't know. I just thought I'd mention it. I stared at him, my mind spinning. So Ken had seen her too? My stomach churned with a mix of anger and confusion. Rick, always the blunt one, chimed in. You've been married for what, 5 years? Why would she need a dating site? Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, Alvin added, his brows furrowed. I mean, I thought you guys were solid. The room suddenly felt too small, like the walls were closing in around me. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for an explanation, but I didn't have one. I didn't even know what to think anymore. We're working on it, I said quietly, not really knowing what else to say. The guys exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable now, but Rick didn't let it go. Man, if she's on a dating site, that's messed up. Why would she even need to do that? I don't know, I muttered, my voice tight. Ken looked apologetic. Sorry, dude. I didn't mean to stir things up. I tried to keep my cool, but the frustration was building. I had come here to get away from all of this, to take a break from the constant stress and doubt, and now, here it was again, right in my face. Can we stop? I said abruptly, louder than I intended. I came here to relax, to take my mind off things, and now we're talking about this. Please, let's just have a normal time. The room went quiet. The guys looked at each other, then at me, nodding in understanding. Travis, always the mediator, cleared his throat. Yeah, sure, man. No problem. Let's switch it up. He gave me a sympathetic smile. So, Travis, how's life treating you? The mood lightened a little after that. They moved on to talking about other things. Work, movies, random stuff. But I wasn't really paying attention anymore. My mind was still stuck on what Ken had said, on Emily, on that damn dating app. I felt like I was on the outside looking in, barely participating in the conversation. After a while, my phone buzzed again. Emily, are you coming home soon, dear? I stared at the screen for a second before replying, my fingers typing faster than I could think. Yes. When I got home from Travis's, the apartment was dark and quiet. Emily was already in bed, asleep, the soft hum of her breathing barely audible from the hallway. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom for a moment, watching her. How much can a loved one hide from you? The day had been exhausting, mentally more than physically, and even though I didn't want to think about anything, the thoughts kept circling back. Emily, Derek, the damn dating app. I hadn't had time to process what Ken said, but it stuck with me like an itch I couldn't scratch. My stomach growled, pulling me from my thoughts. I remembered Emily had cooked earlier. I opened the fridge and grabbed a plate of leftovers. The food was cold and tasted like nothing, but I shoveled it down in the quiet, sitting alone in the kitchen, the soft glow of my phone screen lighting the table as I absent-mindedly scrolled through it. Tomorrow, I'd be meeting Derek. The thought was enough to keep me awake. I had no idea what to expect from the guy, or what he'd tell me. I didn't even know if I wanted to hear it. But whatever he had to say, I knew I needed to hear it. I couldn't keep living in this fog, wondering what was real and what wasn't. Monday morning came too fast. I dragged myself out of bed, groggy and still unsettled from the night before. Emily was already gone. I found a note taped to the fridge, her neat handwriting staring back at me. Honey, today's an important meeting. I won't be back until after 9 p.m. Love you. I sat down for breakfast, trying to enjoy my coffee, when my phone buzzed on the table. It was Mom. I hadn't responded to her message from yesterday, and now she was calling. I let out a sigh, knowing this conversation was going to be just as exhausting as everything else. I picked up the call, already feeling drained. "Hey, Mom," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "Steve, honey, how are you?" she asked, her voice soft and concerned. "I didn't hear back from you. I just wanted to check in." "I've been busy," I replied quickly, wanting to cut this short. "Well, we were thinking, why don't you and Emily come over tonight for dinner? We haven't seen you both in a while, and it would be nice to catch up." I felt a flicker of irritation at the mention of Emily. Of course, Mom had been talking to her. She always knew everything. I clenched my teeth, forcing myself to stay calm. "Mom, we can't tonight. I have work, and Emily has some big meeting. Didn't she tell you? You two talk all the time, right?" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, and I regretted the sarcastic jab immediately. Mom sighed. "Steve, don't be like that. I'm just trying to help. Emily's been stressed. Just don't take things personally, okay?" I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. I didn't have the energy for this. "I'll talk to you later, Mom. I've gotta go." Before she could say anything else, I hung up, tossing my phone onto the table. It was going to be a long day. Work felt like a blur. The sun was shining outside, but it was one of those crisp autumn days where the air felt cold, and no amount of sunlight could warm it up. That's how I felt. Cold, distant, like the world around me was moving, but I was stuck in place. I went through the motions at work, answering emails, sitting through meetings, all the while counting down the hours until my meeting with Derek. My mind kept drifting back to Emily, to what she could be hiding. And every time, I tried to push it away, but it was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. Just after lunch, my boss called me into his office. I hadn't expected it, but when I walked in, he greeted me with a warm smile. "Steve, take a seat," he said, waving me in. "I've been meaning to talk to you." I sat down, trying to read his expression. He looked pleased, almost too pleased. "Listen, you've been doing fantastic work lately," he began. "I see the effort you've been putting in, and it's paying off. The team has noticed it, and so have I." I nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. "Thanks, I've been trying to stay on top of things." "Well, I think it's time you get rewarded for it. We're giving you a bonus," he said, sliding a document across the desk. "And we're considering you for a higher position, a promotion." My heart jumped for a moment. This was huge. More money, a better role, and the opportunity for Emily and me to finally have what we had talked about, a real vacation, maybe even some stability. But that flicker of excitement was quickly overshadowed by the sinking feeling in my gut. Emily. It was strange. I should have been thrilled. But instead, all I could think about was how I wasn't sure if this would even matter. More money, more success. What did any of it mean if my marriage was crumbling? I forced a smile and thanked my boss. He kept talking, praising my work, but I was barely listening. My mind was already somewhere else. The day dragged on until finally, it was time. 9 p.m. I pulled up to Café La Luna, parking my car down the street. It was a small, dimly lit place, tucked between a couple of storefronts. I had never been here before, and the quiet, cozy atmosphere felt almost too calm for what I was about to deal with. I stepped inside and ordered a coffee, trying to calm my nerves. The cafe was nearly empty, save for a few scattered patrons quietly reading or sipping their drinks. I found a seat by the window, glancing at my phone. 5 minutes passed. Then a text came through. "I'll be there in 5 minutes." I waited, watching the door as the minutes ticked by. Then, I saw him. A tall guy, maybe in his early 30s, walked in, dark hair, sharp jawline, dressed stylishly but not overly flashy. He scanned the room for a moment before his eyes landed on me. "Steve?" he asked as he approached, his voice calm, almost casual. I nodded. We didn't shake hands. He took the seat across from me and ordered a coffee. "Isn't it a bit late for coffee?" I asked, my voice sounding more tense than I intended. Derek smirked. glancing at my cup. Same question for you. I didn't reply. There was an awkward pause before Derek took a sip of his coffee and leaned back in his chair, his eyes watching me carefully. So, he began, I'm sure you're wondering why I reached out. I nodded. Yeah, you said you had important information about Emily. But first, how did you get my number? Derek leaned forward slightly. Kim gave it to me. I blinked, surprised. Kim? Emily's sister? He nodded. Yeah, we still talk sometimes. Not often, but enough. I frowned, not sure what to make of that. Kim had been the one to give him my number? What the hell was going on? I didn't press it, though. I had bigger questions. So, what's this about? I asked. What do you want to tell me? Derek's expression darkened slightly, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something. Resentment, maybe even bitterness. Emily, he began, his voice lower now. She's not who you think she is. She lied to you, Steve. I stared at him, waiting for him to continue. We dated for 4 years, he said. I was going to propose to her. I was ready to spend my life with her. But she cheated on me. For 2 years. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What? Derek's eyes were cold now. She told me about it herself, Steve. She threw it in my face. Said I wasn't enough for her, that she needed more than what I could give her. I sat there, stunned, as Derek continued. She said she wanted to start a family, but I didn't propose fast enough. For years was too long. So, she found someone else. Someone to give her the attention she thought she deserved. I swallowed hard, the room suddenly feeling smaller. She hurt me, Steve. Treated me like I was nothing. And the worst part? Everyone else thought she was perfect. Everyone loved her. I sat there, trying to process what he was saying. This didn't sound like the Emily I knew, or thought I knew. Derek leaned forward, his voice steady but filled with pain. She's not who she pretends to be. I didn't know what to say. My head was spinning. Everything Derek had said, everything about Emily's past. It felt like a bad dream. How much of it was true? And if it was, what else had she been hiding? Derek stirred his coffee with a slow, deliberate motion, watching me over the rim of the cup. The air between us felt heavy, like we were both waiting for the other to make the next move. I sat there, still trying to absorb everything he just told me about Emily, about their past, about her betrayal. It didn't feel real, but at the same time, too much was starting to make sense. I didn't know what to think, so I asked the one question that had been gnawing at me the whole time. So, what do you want from me now? My voice came out more frustrated than I intended. Why are you even telling me all this? Do you still have feelings for Emily? Is that what this is about? Derek looked surprised, almost offended. He held up a hand, shaking his head quickly. No, no, it's not like that. I've moved on, trust me. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. I'm doing fine now. I've got a girlfriend. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at that. Why bring up his girlfriend? It felt out of place, like he was trying to prove something, but I didn't know what. And the more he spoke, the more it seemed like there was some angle I wasn't seeing. Okay, good for you, I muttered, still not understanding. But if everything's fine with you now, why come to me? What do you want from me? Derek sighed, running a hand through his hair. He seemed to be weighing his words carefully. Look, I'm not here to mess up your life. That's not my goal. But I know what Emily's capable of. I know how she can play with people's feelings. I felt a wave of unease wash over me. Go on. Derek set down his coffee cup, his expression turning serious. I saw her, Steve. I saw her a couple of weeks ago. At McDonald's. With another guy. My heart skipped a beat. My mouth went dry. McDonald's? That was the place Emily had told me about. The same date she'd said was nothing, just some meaningless conversation. But the fact that Derek had seen her with another man made it feel like a punch to the gut. You're sure it wasn't me? I asked, even though I knew the answer. Derek shook his head. No, I'm sure. I've seen your pictures. I know what you look like. He paused for a second, like he was measuring the impact of his words. It wasn't you. My hands tightened around my coffee cup, the edges of my mind buzzing with questions I didn't want to ask. I tried to keep my voice steady. So what are you saying? You're worried she's going to do to me what she did to you? Derek nodded. Exactly. I don't want you to go through what I went through, man. I've been there, and I know how it ends. Emily, she has a way of getting in your head, of making you think everything's fine, but it's not. And that date? That's just the beginning. Trust me. I stared at him, my stomach churning. Why do you care? Why now? Derek leaned forward, his voice dropping a notch. Because I know what it's like to be where you are. I know how it feels to have her twist the truth, to make you think everything's okay when it's not. And I don't want her to destroy another guy, especially someone who's been married to her for 5 years. I blinked, trying to process his words. Why was he so invested in this? And then he said something that caught me off guard. Kim told me about you. I narrowed my eyes, my heart skipping again. Kim? Yeah, we still talk sometimes. Not often, but we catch up every now and then. He glanced out the window, almost like he was checking to make sure no one was listening. She told me you're a good guy, really kind, that you don't deserve any of this. I was quiet for a moment, digesting that. Kim? We had gotten closer recently, but she never seemed like the type to say something like that. Not to me, at least. She'd always been a little distant, like she was more of an observer than anything else. I never imagined she thought of me as the kind or good guy. I wondered what else she had been saying about me. And you trust what Kim says? I asked, my voice a little sharper than I meant. Why are you so sure I'm this good guy? Derek shrugged, but there was something almost genuine in his tone. Because she's never had a reason to lie to me. And from everything she's told me, you're not the problem here, Steve. Emily is. His words hung in the air like smoke, and I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that had been creeping up on me since the moment we started talking. This guy didn't want to ruin my life. He wasn't here to win Emily back. He just didn't want her to break another person the way she'd broken him. Derek let out a long breath, looking down at his hands. The first red flag I should have seen was how much she loved attention, especially from guys. It's like she couldn't live without it, and I was too blind to see it for what it was. I thought she just liked being social, but man, there's a line, and she crossed it. I didn't say anything, just kept listening, my mind racing. If you want to stay sane, Steve, Derek continued, you might want to think about breaking it off with her. I'm telling you, she's a master at lying, and that date? It's not as innocent as you think. She's just getting started. I sat there, my thoughts swirling, unsure of what to say or do next. Everything he was saying made me question everything I knew about my wife. Emily had always been the center of attention when we went out, but I chalked it up to her being friendly, charismatic. Was it something more? Derek leaned back in his chair, watching me carefully. Look, I'm not telling you what to do. That's up to you. But I've seen this story play out before, and it doesn't end well. The drive home was a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about what Derek had told me. Emily had cheated on him for 2 years, 2 whole years, without him knowing. And now, here I was, 5 years into my marriage, wondering if the same thing was happening to me. I pulled into the driveway and sat in the car for a minute, staring up at the apartment. Emily still wasn't home. It was 11:30. Where was she? Her note said she'd be back by 9. I tried to stay calm, but my thoughts were spiraling. Should I confront her about Derek? Should I tell her I met with him? Maybe I should see how she reacts, try to get a read on her before dropping the bomb. But the longer I sat there, the more my frustration built. I checked my phone. No messages. Nothing from Emily. No explanation as to why she was late. I got out of the car and headed inside. my mind a mess of questions I wasn't sure I wanted answers to. I woke up to the sound of Emily's soft breathing beside me. The room was dim, just the faint morning light creeping through the curtains. I turned over, my eyes adjusting, and saw her sprawled across the bed, her clothes from last night tossed carelessly around the room. A jacket hung halfway off the chair, her shoes scattered near the doorway. It was clear she hadn't been sober when she finally came home. I wasn't surprised anymore. She hadn't even bothered to wake me when she got in. Late again. Drunk again. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in since my conversation with Derek. I had to know what was going on. The truth was clawing at me, and I wasn't going to sit around and pretend everything was fine anymore. I glanced at Emily's phone on the nightstand, the screen facing down, like she was hiding it even while she slept. I knew it wasn't the right thing to do, but after everything, I had to check. I'm not proud, I told myself as I quietly reached for her phone. But Emily had been the one to give me the damn thing in the first place, flashing her text with her friends to prove everything was fine. It was almost like she wanted me to trust her so I'd stop questioning things. I unlocked the phone. The first thing I went to was her chat with her friends, the same one she had shown me before. That's where the information will be. I knew there wouldn't be anything obvious in chats with male names, not if she was careful. And Emily? She was careful. I scrolled through the group chat she had shown me yesterday. Sure enough, the messages were still there, nothing deleted. She really had met with her friends. They had talked about their night out, sending pictures of them posing together at some bar. It's good that we met. We needed this night. One message read, timestamped at 8 p.m. And of course, the pictures were timestamped at 8 p.m., too. The selfies were all the same. Emily and her two friends, laughing, drinks in hand, posing for the camera. But something didn't add up. 8 p.m.? If they split up at 8, where the hell was Emily for the rest of the night? She didn't come home until after midnight, drunk and stumbling. My heart started pounding as I left the chat and scrolled through her other messages. I needed to know where she had been. That's when I saw it. A chat with a male name, Sam. My throat tightened as I clicked on it. There wasn't much there, but I could tell immediately that the conversation had been cleaned up. The first few messages seemed like they were picking up in the middle of something. A casual chat, but with a familiarity that told me they had been talking long before this. The first message was from him. Emily, we need to meet again. Urgently. Can you tonight? I scrolled down, my fingers shaking. Emily replied, what's wrong? You want to repeat it so quickly? Repeat it? I didn't need to read more to understand the implication. My heart was hammering in my chest, my mouth dry. I scrolled a little further, but it was all the same. Small, teasing messages, nothing incriminating in a direct way, but enough to tell me everything I needed to know. She had met someone. Again. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my coat and went outside for a walk. The crisp morning air hit me as soon as I stepped out, clearing my head. I needed to breathe, to think. My mind raced with questions. Why? How long had this been going on? I had seen the red flags, but I ignored them. I let Emily lie to me. She'd been lying all along, hadn't she? I walked for what felt like an hour, replaying everything Derek had said. The first red flags were always her needing attention. He had warned me that this was just the beginning. And here I was, finding out that he was right. By the time I got back to the apartment, I had calmed down enough to think straight, but the anger was still simmering beneath the surface. I opened the door quietly and walked in. Emily was sitting up in bed, her phone in her hand, scrolling through something. As soon as she saw me, she put her phone down quickly and got up, coming over to me with that concerned, sweet look she always used when she was trying to make things seem normal. "Where have you been, honey?" she asked, her voice soft, like nothing had changed. "What's wrong? Something at work?" I couldn't take it anymore. The facade, the fake concern. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my voice steady. I know about Derek. She blinked, clearly confused. Derek? She repeated. Who's that? I narrowed my eyes, feeling my patience slipping. Oh, don't pretend. Her eyes darted back and forth like she was searching for an explanation. Derek. Derek. Honey, I don't know what you're talking about. Your ex. The one you never had, right? The one you claimed didn't exist? Emily's face shifted slightly, her confusion turning to something else, something more calculated. She looked down for a second before finally speaking. Okay, she said softly, like she was admitting to something trivial. I didn't think it was important. We weren't really serious, Steve. We only dated for a month, if you can even call it that. I didn't consider it a relationship. That's why I never mentioned him. I stood there, watching her carefully. She was spinning this so casually, like Derek had been nothing. But that wasn't what he had told me. Not even close. Why wouldn't you tell me? Emily sighed, stepping closer to me, reaching out to take my hands. Because I've told you all along. I was looking for the one. And that's you, Steve. That's why I married you. You're the most wonderful man I've ever known. I regret going on that stupid date with that guy, but it wasn't even a date. We were just walking, eating cheeseburgers, for God's sake. Her hands were soft around mine, her eyes wide and sweet, full of that familiar charm. I could see the cracks, though. She was trying to reel me back in, to make me believe her. It was what she was good at. I stood there, watching her closely, thinking about everything I knew. The lies, the half-truths, Derek's warnings. But I couldn't confront her. Not yet. Not like this. If I wanted to know the full truth, I had to play it smart. I forced a smile, nodding slowly. Yeah, I'm sorry, Emily. I'm not myself lately. Work's a mess, and I guess I've been stressed. I shouldn't have lost my temper. Emily's expression softened, and she pulled me into a hug. It's okay, honey. We'll get through this. I love you. I hugged her back, letting her believe I was buying every word. Let her think everything's fine. The drive to my parents' house was suffocatingly quiet, despite the occasional hum of the engine and the sound of Emily tapping away on her phone. She had been glued to it the entire way, her fingers dancing across the screen like whatever she was doing was far more important than the tension between us. I glanced at her a few times, thinking about everything I'd learned, about Derek, about the lies, and yet I said nothing. It was like we were both pretending none of it had happened, that everything was still the same between us. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. We were on autopilot now, just going through the motions. We pulled up to my parents' house, and I parked the car. The house was as familiar as ever, but this time, it felt different. The warm glow of the porch light, the carefully manicured front lawn, none of it felt comforting anymore. Emily stepped out, still checking her phone, and we walked to the door. My parents greeted us the way they always did, smiling brightly, but mostly toward Emily. They practically ignored me, just like always. Oh, Emily, so lovely to see you, Mom gushed, pulling her into a hug. Dad gave me a quick pat on the back but quickly turned his attention to Emily, asking about her work, her day, anything and everything. Kim will be here a little later, Mom said, leading us into the living room. She's bringing someone with her. Isn't that exciting? I shot Emily a glance, but she was too focused on her phone again to notice. She sat on the couch, engaging in polite small talk with my parents, acting as if our marriage wasn't crumbling right beneath us, as if none of it had happened. So, how's work, Steve? Dad asked, though his tone felt more obligatory than genuine. It's fine, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. I wasn't in the mood for this. Not today. A few minutes later, Emily's phone rang. She glanced at it before answering, Hey, Kim, you're on your way? Great. Okay, see you soon. She hung up and turned to my mom. Kim says she'll be here shortly. Mom's eyes lit up, clapping her hands together. Oh, wonderful. I can't wait to meet whoever she's bringing. We all sat in the living room, sipping tea and continuing the casual conversation. I noticed Emily's hands tremble slightly as she lifted her cup, but she kept up the facade, pretending everything was fine. I wondered if she was as nervous as I was, or if she had no idea what was about to unfold. The doorbell rang. "I'll get it," I said, getting up and heading toward the door. When I opened it, there stood Kim, and next to her was Derek. My stomach dropped. "Hi," Kim said brightly, as if nothing was wrong. "What are you doing here, Steve?" "Oh, by the way, this is Derek." I could barely register what was happening as Derek stepped inside, greeting my parents with a polite nod. Emily was still sitting in the living room, and when she saw Derek, she almost dropped her cup. Her face went pale for a split second before she forced a smile. "Oh," Kim said, smirking as she turned to Emily. "Emily, why are you acting so weird? I thought you two knew each other." Emily blinked rapidly, her hands tightening around her cup. Kim, what are you talking about?" Kim raised an eyebrow. "You know, Derek, have you forgotten all your boyfriends?" Emily swallowed hard, and then, with a forced laugh, she said, "Oh, that Derek. Hi." She waved awkwardly, as if it was the first time seeing him in years. "I didn't recognize you for a moment. It's been a while." Derek nodded, keeping his face calm, but I could tell he was enjoying the situation. "Yeah, a long time," he said. Emily quickly added, "Well, we only dated for a month. It wasn't anything serious, so I didn't really remember. You know how it is." My parents exchanged pleasantries with Derek, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrent of tension between the three of us. Mom kept smiling, asking him questions about his life, where he worked, how long he'd known Kim. Emily, on the other hand, was fidgeting in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. "I'll be right back," Emily said, standing abruptly and excusing herself. She hurried out of the room, and a few moments later, Kim followed her, a knowing smirk on her face. I stayed behind, sitting with my parents and Derek, trying to act like I wasn't on the verge of losing it. We were making small talk when suddenly, raised voices came from the hallway. It was Emily and Kim, and it didn't sound friendly. "I told you to stop." Emily's voice echoed through the house. "What's your problem, Emily? Why are you acting like this?" Kim's voice shot back. I could hear the tension building between them, and before I could react, Derek stood up. "Excuse me," he said, heading toward the hallway. My parents barely seemed to notice the tension, still caught up in the idea of Kim having a new boyfriend. "Oh, Kim's new guy is very attractive, don't you think, Steve?" Mom said, smiling like this was a normal day. I clenched my fists under the table, trying to keep calm. "Yeah," I muttered. "By the way, Derek and Emily dated for 4 years." Mom blinked, looking surprised for a second. 4 years? Oh, they must have looked wonderful together. The words hit me harder than I expected. They must have looked wonderful together? What the hell was that supposed to mean? My stomach twisted with anger, but I kept my mouth shut. A few minutes later, Emily, Kim, and Derek returned to the room. Emily's face was flushed, and I could tell she was barely holding it together. Kim, on the other hand, looked pleased with herself, and Derek's expression was unreadable. "So," Kim said, breaking the tension with a sly smile, "I think it's time we talk about what's really going on." Emily shot her a look, but it was too late. "What are you talking about?" Dad asked, looking confused. Kim crossed her arms, glancing at Emily before continuing. "Emily's been cheating on Steve." The room went silent. Emily's face drained of color as she stared at Kim in disbelief. "Kim, stop," Emily hissed, her voice shaking. "No, Emily," Kim said, her voice cold. "It's time everyone knows. Steve deserves better than this." My parents were frozen, wide-eyed, staring at Emily. Mom looked like she was going to faint. Dad just blinked, trying to process what was happening. "That's not true," Emily shouted, but her voice wavered. "It was just one mistake." Kim raised an eyebrow. "One mistake? Come on, Emily. We both know that's not true." Derek stood by, watching silently as the truth unraveled in front of everyone. I could see the guilt, the pain, and the anger written all over Emily's face, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. "I've heard enough," I said, standing up abruptly. "I'm done." Emily looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. "Steve, please." But I didn't listen. I grabbed my coat, nodded briefly to Derek and Kim, and walked out the door. I didn't know how Emily was going to get home, but I didn't care anymore. It was over. 2 weeks later, the apartment felt emptier than ever. I was going through the motions: work, sleep, repeat. I had already filed for divorce, and Emily had packed her things and left without much of a word. The last time we spoke was when she left the apartment, her suitcase in hand. As she walked out, I had forced a joke. "Did you forget your phone charger?" Emily didn't respond. She just closed the door behind her, and that was the end of it. Now, I was sitting alone in the apartment, trying to forget, trying to move on. But it wasn't easy, especially with my parents constantly defending her. They refused to see the truth, refused to believe that Emily had done anything wrong. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. "Steve, I just talked to Emily, and I think you're making a mistake. She's going through a rough time, and you didn't try hard enough to understand. You shouldn't be doing this to her. She's still part of the family, no matter what." I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. Still part of the family? What about me? What about the fact that she had lied, cheated, and torn our marriage apart? I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say.